Hi there, I'm Coach Craig Kenneth.
And I'm Coach Victoria.
And today we're going to be talking about relationships have no rules. Feels like this is Sparta or something. Welcome to Thunderdome.
Where relationships have no rules.
What do we mean by that? Relationships have no rules.
Well, there are no rules as far as what you want out of a relationship. And so society can sometimes tell us that you need to have a certain type of relationship, or a relationship has to go in a certain direction in order for it to be legitimate.
Yeah.
And so this whole concept is about being able to find out what you want, what works for you, and manifesting those relationships in your life and building those.
Yeah.
And so
I thought it was really interesting when she presented the idea about that relationships don't have to be a certain way. In other words, your relationship with your partner may be very different than even your parents' relationship with each other, or your friends with their best friend, or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, everybody has their own views on how to have a relationship. And so you don't have to go by what other people want you to live your life. You can live your own life and live your relationships the way you want to.
Exactly. And there's likely other people in the world, millions of other people, who think in similar ways that you do. So you think about how there's different dating platforms for different interests. There are people who think in similar ways. And so this video is just to encourage you to find those people, and also identifying that for yourself makes it easier. So to start, there's this concept of a relationship escalator.
Okay.
So this is a term that basically was coined out of the polyamorous community. So before I get a bunch of comments about this, I wanted to say that we can learn a lot from how different people handle their relationships. And polyamorous community in general, you have to be able to communicate well in order for those relationships to work. So a lot of the skills that people who have multiple partners need to have are extremely useful for even monogamous people. So it might be a little out of the box, a little different, but I thought I would talk about it today because we can benefit from it.
Sure. All right. So this form is going to encompass what? What kind of questions?
So it's just different factors and areas of your life that for many people, they just assume that their other partner agrees to or doesn't agree to. So for example, some people enter into a relationship thinking that the ultimate goal is marriage, kids, and family.
Okay, true.
And so this form really breaks down all the different aspects of what a relationship involves and allows you to decide on it. So you can decide on a scale of not applicable, must have, where this is something that if is not there is a deal breaker. Would like to have, something that is negotiable for you.
Okay.
Maybe, another negotiable. And also off limits, which, you know, I definitely don't want this. I don't want a partner who has this or is looking for this. It wouldn't work for me.
These are all good things to think about for yourself, but also when you're trying to gauge how compatible you are with your ex. That maybe they had some must-haves that were off limits for you. That could lead to a breakup.
Exactly. Exactly. And so there's this concept of the relationship escalator, which I mentioned earlier, which essentially is how society expects for a relationship to go. So normally this involves, you know, meeting, maybe in college, whatever it is, then getting engaged, then getting married, then having children, then buying a house, or maybe living in a luxury apartment first. Maybe. And
getting a divorce, and then having a second family.
Possibly. Yeah.
And not telling your first family about the second family.
Yeah, and so the idea, it's like an escalator where as soon as you hop on, things just increase in intensity until you find yourself in the situation where you don't know if you necessarily completely agreed to it or wanted it, but it just felt like the natural progression of things, if that makes sense.
Sure. All right. So let's go through the questionnaire. You guys can think about these. I think they're helpful to think about, to knowing what yourself or what you want for yourself and what maybe your partner wanted, and see how well you aligned or didn't align.
Exactly. And the form itself, it comes from shareableloveforms.com. So if you do want to do the entire survey, it is quite long, but it's worth it just to see what you want. We just selected some of the top most interesting ones that we'll talk about today. So we'll get started with that.
Okay.
With the first factor, that has to do with commitment.
Got it.
So marriage, is that something that you must have? Is that something that's a maybe? Is it something that's off limits? Other things in this commitment category include sharing pets, having children together, owning a home, power of attorney, which is something that not a lot of people think about, especially when you're younger, or wills, and also support through health challenges.
Yeah.
So it's important to remember that all of these things are optional, and if you do decide to, let's say you really do want to share pets, or you really do want to support your partner through health challenges, that all of that is intentional. So the next category is physical.
Okay.
So how do you feel about public displays of affection? Is it something you're comfortable with? What about your sexual chemistry together? Is that something that you must have in order to have a healthy relationship for you personally? What about condom use, or talking about safe sex or barriers? What are your rules around that, or your own boundaries?
Yeah.
And also frequency. You know, maybe there's periods of your life where you're not as sexually interested. Maybe there's health complications that make that difficult. And so these are all things to consider and think about.
Yeah, and it's not easy to line up with people all the time, because sometimes people can line up in many ways, but then there's a couple that are deal breakers or off limits, and the relationship doesn't last. So it's important to know this about yourself and the people that you date.
Next, we have the emotional realm. So this can include things like saying I love you. This can also be sharing about the past, and also supporting each other through mental health challenges. I do also want to note that with this form, your answers today might be completely different than your answers a year from now, 5 years from now, or 10 years from now. So this is something that's fluid and changes over time. So I would encourage you, if you did have enough interest to look at the website and fill out that form, to tab it, and maybe some time from now to revisit it and see how your values might have changed.
Yeah, or your partners.
Yeah, exactly. Next is communication. So,
this is so important.
Oh, yeah. This can be things like check-ins, and talking about frequency again. How often is it important for you, for your partner to check in on you? Do you want to talk with them daily? Do you want to talk with them weekly? What about discussing family and friends? Do you want to be able to have conversations about other people in your lives? What about discussing politics?
I've seen it cause some breakups in the last couple of years.
And it's important to remember that all of these things are optional. You can set a boundary. Hey, I don't want to talk about politics. And that can be your boundary for yourself to make the relationship work.
Yeah.
We do have couples that we see that come from very different religious or political backgrounds, and they manage to make it work because of their level of communication and how they are able to set parameters for themselves.
Yep.
Next is finances. So agreeing on a shared bank account or not. Maybe you keep your finances separate. And also receiving financial support from others, or financially supporting each other. So that's an important conversation. I know that that is one of the top conflicts that couples have when we look at the research, is finances. Ends up on the top 3 very often.
Yeah.
Next is social integration. So this is meeting children. Some couples who meet later on in life, they have children from previous partners, and they might be hesitant to allow you to meet the children. And so just thinking about, when do you think that would be appropriate for yourself if you're in that situation? How important is that to you? And also presenting as a couple on social media. So do you want to be Facebook official, Instagram official?
Can you be Instagram official?
I guess so. I had a friend who was telling me about how posting them on your story is a soft opening, and then when you post a picture of them, like on your actual profile, then that's the grand opening.
So first you see a picture of their sock.
Yeah, in the story.
Wait a minute, I've never seen that sock in their stories before. What does this mean? 2 weeks later, it's a shoe.
Then it's the grand
and the
opening.
sock. Then you see a knee.
Oh no.
This is getting serious.
So then the next category we have is quality time. So this is how much regular scheduled time that you have together. Also scheduling initiation, which, for most people they would expect, an equal amount of initiation from both partners, but different things work for different couples.
Yeah.
And also
particularly with your attachment style.
Exactly. And there's also shared hobbies. So do you want to have a hobby that's all to yourself, that you can really feel independent in and thrive in and really be in your element without your partner? Or do you and your partner want to have hobbies together and pursue a mutual goal together in that regard? So
probably healthy to have both.
Yeah, I agree. And then lastly is autonomy. So this includes that balance of time together versus time apart. Also having independent friendships, which can be, you know, really beneficial in relationships. And also the presence of alone time. So do you have time to recharge if you need it?
All of these are so important. And, you know, you're not always going to line up with the person that you're with. In fact, you're going to have differences of opinion. But you have to be able to respect your partner's needs, and they need to respect yours. And you got to find some kind of balance. Now, some of these you might not be able to negotiate on. Some of these might be deal breakers to you. That you say, no, if we're not going to have kids, then I don't want to be in a relationship. Or if we don't get married, I don't want to do it. That's up to you. And you have to figure out what's most important to you and find a balance with whoever you're with. Not always easy to do.
Exactly. And remember that all of these are just the beginning of the conversation. On the website, it does suggest that you go through this form, print out a copy, have your partner go through the form, and then compare results. And so this is a really useful tool when deciding how you want your relationship to go. And it should be the foundation of a really productive conversation and really understanding your partner more, their needs, their wants, and their goals.
That's right. Like we said up front, relationships don't have rules. You can maybe develop something with your partner, that rules that work for you both, but you don't have to live your life like somebody else tells you to live it. And that's what we're trying to tell you.
Exactly.
You can find your own happiness in your relationships, even if it's very different from how your friends and family live theirs. So, things to think about, especially when you're trying to understand your ex and maybe why they left the situation. Because there's a good chance there probably were some deal breakers on this list, right? All right. Hopefully you found this helpful. If you want to get our help personally, you can do that on my website, askcraig.net. I do email coaching and I do Skype. Victoria is also available for Skype coaching.
I'm here if you'd like to talk.
Just click on her name at the top of the website to do that. But that's it for this video. I'm Coach Craig Kenneth.
And I'm Coach Victoria.
And we will talk with you soon.